Welcome to Quantum Potential, a podcast dedicated to curiosity and discovery. My name is Cybele Raver, and I serve as the Provost of Vanderbilt University. As a leader in higher education and as a social scientist, I believe that we can transform higher education for the 21st century. At my core, I am wildly curious about other people's work, whether it's in science, the social sciences, the humanities, or the arts. This podcast gives us the opportunity to break open new ideas through discovery and creative expression. Today's episode is incredibly special for a number of reasons. First, I'm thrilled to introduce my guest, Ji Hye Jung, Associate Professor of Percussion at Vanderbilt's Blair School of Music. Ji Hye, as a world-renowned prize-winning percussionist, you've performed over 100 concerts, including as a soloist at Carnegie Hall, with the Houston Symphony, and at prestigious concert halls and festivals across Portugal, South Africa, Hong Kong, Finland, France, and Germany. The Los Angeles Times has rightly called you spectacular. I love that. In addition, we're deeply honored to welcome the two-time Grammy-winning Attacca Quartet, featuring Amy Schroeder, Domenic Salerni, Nathan Schram, and Andrew Yee, all of whom are here with us on campus today. We're thrilled to have them perform live as part of today's episode. Welcome, all of you.
Thank you.
I'm also delighted to be joined by my friend and colleague, Jad Abumrad, professor, composer, producer, and the visionary behind the groundbreaking Radio Lab podcast. Please join me in welcoming them all. So before we go any further, Ji Hye, could you go ahead and just play a piece of music you've selected for us so that we can focus front and center on your work and on the power of your creative expression? Amazing. Was that the first time that this group has played this composition?
Yeah.
Amazing.
This morning. Yeah.
So amazing. Inspiring. So tell us a little bit. I'm going to do a little bit, stealing a page from your playbook, Ji Hye. I saw you teach, and I saw that the first thing that you asked a student after he performed a piece was that you said, let's take a step back and take the big picture. And you asked the student to tell you about a piece. What is this piece for you? So tell us, what is this piece for you?
Wow. You stole that.
Rotten. Trick.
Yeah. This piece is called Aluminous by Attacca Quartet, one of my good friends who wrote this piece for vibraphone and string quartet. And this piece is about aluminum, the metal. And you see a lot of them here. And when we think about this metal, you immediately goes to something sharp, something cold, and angular. And that's how we start the piece. Like we start the piece with a string quartet doing amazing, really punchy staccato, pizzicatos, and rhythmic and syncopations. And I play with these sticks instead of regular mallets to give that articulation. But I think the highlight of the piece is the middle where the metal sort of dissolves and becomes one of the softest elements. And I think that once that section is done, I think even though I go back to this really ticky articulation sound, I think string then takes over that soft metal and wins it all. I finish with joining them with a bow on the vibraphone. So I think in this piece, trying to capture these many different kinds of elements of being angular and something, becoming totally opposite of what we think of the metal being. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I was going to say.
I was going to say the exact same thing. Yeah.
Of course. It's so simple.
I mean, the first time I heard the piece, I just was thinking like how bright and sparkly it was, actually. We actually get to play a little bit ponticello close to the bridge, so we get those kinds of like bright, sparkly overtones as well to sort of complement what you're doing there on the aluminum. And yeah, it's bright and sparkly, and it just evokes like almost like a starry sky in my mind.
I literally think sparklers.
Sparklers,
yeah, sparkly. I think of like that kind of like magnesium metal burning. That's like you're kind of not supposed to look at it, but it's entrancing.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's also funny when we play with percussionists. We're always like, did we do a good job? And in the opening, it's just the quartet, and so in a way, we play. And then as soon as you start, everyone's like, oh yeah, that does sound like the video. Is it the same or is it slightly corrected and better now?
No, it was great. It was great.
So I love that combination of the sparkly, sort of whimsical piece. And then there was a vibe that got sort of spooky and poignant, and then very hard-edged. The idea of metal, I didn't know that was the title, actually. But
like junkyard.
Yeah,
scary.
And it made me think of, you all have spoken in an interview on a video about shredding. I've never heard of anybody talking about shredding on violins or on string instruments other than guitar. And I just love that energy of the sort of sexy bravado of just going for it, right? And I was just curious how it feels to play, because at some points you're all bearing down really intensely.
Mm-hmm. It's fun.
Yeah.
Playing music is fun. Yeah.
We love groove, so in this quartet, so to get to play with someone like Ji Hye, on a piece like this is it's our jam. It's what we love to do. So
it's true when rhythm becomes more important than sound quality. I think we kind of shine a little bit, we sparkle. Just because I think there is something really freeing about saying okay, we can be extremely delicate and with our instruments and really carve out the sounds, but when we can just kind of groove and have a good time and kind of treat our instruments a little bit more like electric guitars or with a little distortion that's naturally created, I think we do kind of feel, we feel just a little cooler than we are.
Well, I think what's really funny is that we talked about coming to the rhythm world, and you talked about coming to the texture world. You know, like in terms of like this warmth, and I think that's really cool that we get to sort of like share responsibilities and sort of like and inspire each other like in different sort of like textural and rhythmic ways.
And then you get to join us in the texture at the end with the bow and everything, so that's cool.
What a great way of hearing music. I have no background in music, and so the idea of hearing texture versus rhythm and exchanging that across the kind of role that you would usually play. That brings me to a second question about borders and an extent to which I've loved listening to what you have recorded in terms of this idea of crossing borders. I think you've commented about playing Renaissance music and minimalist music in the same piece, for example. What do you think, or how do you address that here? Is that a sense of sort of expanding the space between the borders that the instruments sort of are usually confined to?
I think you will not find a string quartet that can do this in one day. They are one of the best, and that's why it's so exciting to have this platform, Chamber Music City, to bring them here in Nashville and share their gift and talent. And yeah, if you give it to these two regular string player, correct me if I'm wrong, like it is really difficult. Rhythm is something maybe not the string players will grab towards. But in
Well
this...
said. Very delicately said.
Maybe not the first one, but in this piece, we all really need to share that rhythmic grooves. And, you know, knowing them, before I invited them to come to play a concert with me tomorrow, like I knew that this is one of their main skill set, able to play many different kinds of music, innovative collaborations. Really, you guys do define what it means to be a classical musician in 21st century.
Thanks.
Amazing.
Really sweet.
Amazing. Well, I want to come back to the question of Nashville, but I think the third question I had before we transition and you retune is really about the method. I love speaking on this podcast with scientists and scholars and artists about the method of their creative expression or their discovery, their work. How do you go about connecting with a composer for this piece? Is this something that you commissioned? And how do you then work with a composer in creation of new music, right? It's not simply that this person is long passed away and you can have free reign with a piece. This person may be still, able to speak back to you about what you're doing and how you're performing and how you're expressing their creative intent. Tell me a little bit about that method.
All of us here love new music, working with living composers. They have done a number of things. This piece, particular one, is not for us, but maybe this is a starting point. But yeah, I think just knowing about their style of music, nowadays there are so many different kinds of style of music that gets written. There is no borderline of you write this particular style of music. And because of that, I think for us as a musician, it is becoming more on us to find out, what kind of music do they write? So luckily we know Andy and this music really well, but if we didn't, we'll probably do the same kind of homework of knowing what kind of background is this person coming from? And is there a reason why this person wrote this thing? And yes, we start with learning the notes, but I think at the end of the day, we really have to bring that emotion and find our own expression on top of those notes that we see on the page.
Fascinating. And how about for you all?
I mean, it's funny what you said about living composers versus composers who are no longer with us, because sometimes I actually almost feel more freedom with a composer who's able to be with us, because it's more of a collaborative process, and there's less of a guessing game. And I feel like a lot of times we feel, we as a quartet try not to do this too much, but we feel so beholden to what's written on the page when it comes to Beethoven or
canon.
Yeah, exactly. But I think now, of course, working with so many living composers at this point, we try to see Beethoven in that way, as a real person who we could speak to and who is trying to speak to us from the page and say it's okay, Amy, you can play that the way you want to, you know what I mean? So yeah, well, all I'm trying to say is sometimes working with the composer, we have flexibility in being able to say like, this melody or this harmony, it makes me feel this, like, is that the right kind of vibe? Or, and a composer will be able to say like, actually, or yeah, totally, go for it. Or I didn't think about it that way. Like, yeah, go for it more. So
It's great. I mean, it just reminds me that there's a sixth person with the quartet, and you, Ji Hye, that, this idea that person has contributed to today's performance that just may not be in our midst.
Yeah.
Great. Great. So let's take a break and allow you all to retune, and then we'll be back. Welcome back, everyone. Domenic, would you like to introduce this piece?
Sure. So we're going to play the first movement of the singular quartet that Maurice Ravel wrote, probably 120 years ago now. And we love this piece, and we've played it a bunch, and we've sort of grown with it, and it's going to be out on a recording soon. But we're going to play the first movement for you, and we hope you enjoy.
Great. Spectacular. Thank you. Is everybody else just trying to have that lump in their throat move out of their throat? I have to say, watching the emotional expressions in your faces, but particularly yours, just highlights for me just the incredible impact that music has on us individually and collectively. So I'll take that same question. What does this piece mean for you?
My God, this piece is everything. A couple of us have stories that are eerily similar of just hearing this particular quartet for the first time and knowing that that is what we wanted to do for a living was to play this particular quartet.
Wow.
And
how old were you when that happened?
I think I was maybe 15 or 16.
Yeah, I was like 14 or 15, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like one of those hard to put your finger on why the piece is so perfect. Like, we've been playing this piece. The quartet has been together now for 22 years. Amazing. And this is one of the first pieces we played 22 years ago. And every time we come back to it, I love it more and more. It's just a piece that doesn't get old. Every other quartet that we come back to, it's a little bit like, oh, this old hat. And then, but this one doesn't do that. This one, like, it's just, there's always some new thing that you hear, and there's just something exciting about just the way that it all comes together, and it's just so natural. And I could imagine if I had written this quartet, I probably wouldn't have written a second one either.
When you nail it the first time,
it's all downhill from there.
But to credit also like the audience here, I also feel like this piece in particular benefits so well from just the live performance and like feeling the energy in the room. Because I was actually yesterday on the plane here, I was thinking like, oh, we're playing Ravel again. I love that piece so much. I really hope I'm not getting sick of it. Like I had the thoughts like the first time in my life, and it made me a little sad. And then even during rehearsal today, and then just now, like something different happened, and like certain sounds were different. And I'm actually tearing up a little bit because I love the piece so much. It's never going to die. The love for me.
It's amazing. Can anybody just give me a two-minute quick backstory on Ravel's, what was going on that led him to write this piece? It's so rich. It's so intense.
It's so rich. I'm hardly a professor, but the irony of this piece is that he really, really wanted to win this prize, the Prix de Rome. And he had this, dream of winning this prize and going off to Rome and, being this celebrated composer. And they just wouldn't give it to him. And he applied like 2 or 3 times or something. And the Academy was like, no, not interested. And so there was something perhaps obsessive about it, but there's also this desire for sort of perfection. I mean, Ravel was notoriously very particular. And you sort of hear that in this music because it's just so beautifully, like every note is so beautifully conceived, but there is just such emotional depth behind it that maybe he was working through something, but I like to think that he just put everything that he was experiencing at the time.
Just left it all out.
Just left it all on the table.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. Amazing.
One of the things that you brought up early on when working with it that like is so funny to me is that like Ravel thought the piece was all about clocks. Mm-hmm. And like the modern way to play this piece is like hyper flexible. It's like an etude in how to be a flexible string quartet.
Yeah.
And part of that's it's like talking about working with living composers and dead composers. Like I bet he wishes he was alive and could be like, oh no, this is so wrong. You guys sound great, but it's like
wait, it was a Salvador Dali clock, right?
Yeah, totally. It's like totally melting clocks and stuff. But I think that's one of the things that's so powerful about the genius of this piece is like you could probably play it backwards and it would be beautiful. Like it's just so like there's so much craftsmanship, there's so much like genuine care put into like the pacing of everything and the depth of the harmonic language. It's just any corner you go into with this piece will be miraculous that you can't mess it up, which is kind of a fun thing to have.
And is it part of the canon? I mean, again, drawn to this idea of music that's familiar versus music that might feel foreign, right? And the extent to which you all and you, Ji Hye, especially are, I think, known for stretching across global contexts. And it invites, I think, people like me who may know less about music theory or less about music history into the group, into the conversation. It's sort of a inherently cosmopolitan invitation, I feel. And I wonder how you all feel about that kind of choice, whether to choose a piece that's more canonical or choose a piece that's from another country that maybe I don't know anything about Korean ship workers' songs. And then I hear your piece on the marimba and I think, amazing.
You watched it?
Of course I did.
Thank you.
Well, I think something that we've experienced in our career was we used to have the kind of programs where we would play a few really old pieces and then we would play one like short sort of modern thing that illuminated the older pieces. And now I feel like we kind of do the opposite, where we play a lot of new music and then we put on one piece of old music that can shine a light on maybe where things have come from. And the kind of audiences that come to hear us now sometimes when we play like in like a club or just in non-traditional venues, the Ravel is the weird one. You know, if we were to play
They're expecting the edgy shredding.
So like in a chamber music society setting, the Ravel, like, oh yes, of course, the Ravel. You know, yes. I remember hearing the Budapest play that back in 1952. You know, like that kind of thing. It would be an expected move, but to play it in circumstances now is what we really like. You know, we played it in a concert with Patrick Watson, like in Central Park, and it was just so fun to just like have this like audience like out in like Prospect Park and, you know, drinking beer, and we were playing the second movement of Ravel.
And in the middle of the movement, he had this really amazing electronic setup, and he just sent us through this really big wall of synthesizers. Wow. And all of a sudden we're like, dun 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 dun. It was like such a cool moment where we're just like, yeah, we can still mess with this music. And you know, true to form, you still can't mess it up. You know?
Yeah.
It's like when we were playing Beethoven in Radio City with the ELO orchestra fans, and they were Beethoven, it's awesome.
But I just think that's amazing that you can make something possible for, you know, a group that or an audience or an individual that might not be able to have that conversation verbally or might not be able to access that conversation off of text. You know, I think a lot about scientific text and literature and dialogue, but I don't often think about the ways that you open up that space through sound, through music. It's cool to think about.
It's a nice reminder that like we're not so different than we were 100 years ago, and like we play music from like 300-400 years ago, and it's like it's still. Sometimes people might not realize that these people lived so long ago, but we're still so relevant. There's still this like deep human connection about what makes us feel, what makes us react, and it's just a great reminder that music is music, and that you know, these time periods and these classifications we put on it really aren't necessary.
And how is that to come to Nashville? So I really wanted to ask you, Ji Hye, about the creation of Chamber Music City. Nashville may not have been the first place that we might have imagined you to do that. You could do it in any city around the world. You are internationally known. This group is internationally known. Why choose Nashville for new music and for the incredibly creative, brilliant process that you're engaging in?
The short answer to that is Nashville is my home. I've been recently thinking more about what it means to have home, like physically and spiritually. I left my hometown, my parents' house, when I was 11 years old for better education, better school, better opportunities, and better jobs. So I've been here, this is my 10th year.
It's great.
And it's feeling like this is becoming more like a home. And I go outside of Nashville to perform other venues, other people's festival, and it's wonderful. But it's been driving me crazy that we don't have one here in Nashville. So with a good friend of mine's help and board member, like trying to do something new here in Nashville. And it is Music City.
It is indeed.
But we don't have this chamber music platform that we can bring Attacca Quartet to. So it is happening. Dream is coming true, and it is really exciting. A lot of work. I still don't know how the whole nonprofit world works. Still learning. But yeah, that's the whole reason why bring this special experience for people in Nashville, for my friends and neighbors.
It's great. So I'll open it up to questions from the audience, and I'll start with my wonderful colleague, Jad. Jad, I know you had many thoughts about this incredible group, and I'd love to toss it to you.
Thank you. I just want to say to all of you, that was like kind of extraordinary. It was just such a, both pieces. I'll start with the second piece. One of the things that was so deeply moving about hearing it, but it was also seeing the way in which you, at four people, came together in the sonorities that you were playing and then separated as, I could see, I mean, what we don't often talk about is that the quartet isn't just that you are all defined by your instruments, but it's also a social world that you're creating together. And how do you define yourselves between the four of you in terms of your social roles in the making of the music? Not just the instruments you play, but the roles you play in the creation of that social world.
I love that. Do you need me to repeat that, Jad? Because
Yes,
I don't know
please.
if I can. Well, you just went from this really, the point about home to this point about community.
Yeah.
And the idea that these four brilliant musicians are creating community, and that they each has a social role in that community, and the extent to which you each want to comment on your social roles as you create together.
It changes from day to day.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the quote that came to mind is Brahms and Clara Schumann in their correspondence refer to repeatedly that music is a republic. I sort of love this idea, and that...
Can you say that again?
That
Sorry.
music is a republic.
Music is a republic?
And so that
Awesome.
kind of, in modern days, implies that roles change and that people are cool with that. And I think we do this on a secondly, if not millisecondly basis.
Yeah.
Particularly when it's like if there's a chord that needs to blend a certain way. Just to speak from the role of second violin, there's this great spot at the end of the first movement where I'm playing one note in one intonation, kind of for Amy, and then I change it. The next bar is the same note, and I literally change where I put my finger for Andrew. So it's a really fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Every time that happens, I just get tickled. And the more we all individually get tickled, the more the group is tickled. We're just a bunch of ticklers, I guess.
From the Republic to something else.
I remember when we were working, we made a record with Mike League from Snarky Puppy, and he's leads this amazing band and is like really the leader of the band. And I remember every time he kind of introduced us, he'd go, "This is the Attacca Quartet. They're a real democracy." and then he said it like a lot of times to the point where I was like, "Is this unique?" Because in our world, it's like most you have different quartets have different dynamics. Some are kind of a little more. You have like an iron fist leader, and some are, have like a couple that are married, and they kind of like do a lot of the stuff. But for the most part, it's like a pretty democratic process, and it is pretty special how like Dom was saying, like yes, we make group decisions, but a lot of times there's like these millisecond, like we all really understand what the air in the room says, and so we are all constantly like taking the temperature of like I put this out there like, oh, I don't think it sat quite as well. Like, it's feeling a little like, foreign in this area. So maybe I should adjust. And like, there's like so many micro adjustments, which is like, the more we play together, the more I realize like, it really is special what we have, like how we are like a true musical republic. And it's, I don't know, it's not as common as I thought it was, which makes me feel even more lucky.
Yeah, because I think there are a lot of people love stories about string quartets who hate each other. You know, like everyone's like, oh yeah, they couldn't stand each other, but the music they made
different floors in the hotel, right?
was fine. It was fine. They did whatever. They did a good job. I love just the way that in a quartet you can, like Dom was saying, like with that one note, like that one note is a gift to Amy. It's a gift to me. It's like a series of small gifts that we give to each other. That not even and by giving a gift to Dom, I'm not giving a gift to Dom. I'm giving a gift to the sort of quartet orb in the middle that exists completely outside of us, right? So anytime you insert your own agenda, your own ego outside of this entity that is the Attacca Quartet, you suddenly create a split in the dynamic of what you're trying to say to the audience. And I think that being in a quartet that really values that message that goes out is really quite special. I feel like we're having like a really nice therapy session. We actually do really a long way. Yeah. We really hate each other though. Different floors.
I was just thinking about how you went from such a psychological to such a metaphysical conversation. I just love this image of the orb, because I think we feel it. We feel this pulsing, cool thing that's happening in the room that you're creating.
It's like a literal, the vibration of all four of our instruments is like.
Do you remember who said that to us for the first time? There was someone who kind of gave us that image. Maybe it was Don Weilerstein.
It was like the quartet in residence at the time.
Okay, and that orb has been there ever since.
Yeah,
amazing. Well, I'd love to throw it open for a couple of questions, and then we'll wrap up. Yes.
I know you guys have been together for 22 years. That's like making a great old fashioned. You're like, I didn't know these things could do that. Mm-hmm. How long did it take to you guys to feel like you reached that point where it's like, I don't think we want to sub anyone else in. This is our quartet here. We're just going to ride with this.
Mm.
It's funny, I feel like more often than not, we're priding ourselves on the fact that we're all very individual, and that we're, like, it used to be like a quartet was supposed to sound like one entity, like we all had, you used to have the same instrument makers across the quartet, and like, you didn't put your names on the program, it was just like Quartet X, and now people are like, hey, Attacca Quartet's pretty cool, but especially because like I can hear each personality, so but there is this constant focus on like trying to be in the same conversation as each other. But I think more and more we're actually trying to say like relish in our personalities, which gets kind of to your social question too. It's like enjoying the fact that we sound different, and so we're not trying to sound like this unnatural thing, which makes us kind of be more happy because we don't have to kind of push down our ego all the time. We can be who we are, and thank God it works. Yeah.
Well, in thinking about gift giving in that way, I always feel like sometimes in certain moments I'm like, oh, this is Nate's quartet. Like, let's, you know what I mean? And like it changes the whole sound in that way because, or like, this is Andrew's quartet. Now this is Dom's quartet, and or this is Nate and Dom's quartet. Like, you know what I mean? And like it just those combinations of the dynamics and the relationship and everything we know about each other can just change in that moment, and it changes the whole group sound. So that's why I feel like it can sort of be more individual at times, but hopefully cohesive because we're trying to elevate each other.
Mm-hmm. But I also love that like our job was a job in 1780.
Yes, I will have a quartet for dinner.
It's like being like an old-fashioned cobbler. No modern machines, just hammers. And there's a certain wizardry in having a timeless job. I think it's the same as being like a chef, a cook. You tap into this ancient way of taking care of your neighbors, and there's something really beautiful about that. And I think part of that is that we all cook at home, but like most people don't play string quartets at home, so like this the way how did you do that? Like it's an interesting thing because it's like, oh yeah, very, very few people on earth like really understand what it truly means to be in a proper string quartet. And so it does end up feeling like magic. And it's one of those things where like Nate and Dom joined a little bit later on, but Amy and I started the quartet 22 years ago. And I will never have a musical partner who I will have played with longer than Amy for the rest of my life. You know, and like that, like the way that I can just see Amy out of the corner of my eye, and I can know exactly what she needs me to do, is like a really, it's a really special thing about string quartet. And because there are so many string quartets that have been written over the years, and now there is this big renaissance of like people wanting to write new music for string quartet. It's just really, it's this really interesting sort of way that we can exist out of time.
Remember to stay curious and to continue to explore new ideas so that we can continue that amazing energy as we go forward. So we'll be back next time with another guest who's really pushing the boundaries of discovery. Until then, I'm Cybele Raver, and this is Quantum Potential.
The Quantum Potential podcast comes from Vanderbilt University. Your host is Cybele Raver. Thank you to our guest, Ji Hye Jung and the Attacca Quartet. Production by Matriarch Digital Media. For more information about Quantum Potential, go to vanderbilt.edu/quantum potential. Stay curious.